Thank you for joining me for another quick hits conversation. I'm Dr. Robyn. With me today, I have Dr. Mohan Ananda, Dr. Ulwyn Pierre, and Dr. Bob Choat. And I want to ask the question, how can leaders avoid engaging in the Peter principle in their organizations? And the Peter principle, for a quick definition, is promoting someone to the level of their incompetence. They can do a job, so you promote them to the next job, and then they can't do the next job, and you're kind of stuck with them. So Dr. Ulwyn, how do people avoid that?
Okay, there are several. I want to talk about it in categories.
Okay, let's start with one.
Leaders have to have responsibility. The individual has to have responsibility, and the company has to have responsibility. And I feel that there is just one HR responsibility that tends to be focused on. So for me, it's in the manager's responsibility is that they need to take time to understand the vision for their employees. There needs to be a context in which they're operating. So therefore, what happens is that they're proactive in preparing that employee for advancement within the company. And also to the succession planning process tends to be fraught with problems. And with the succession planning process embedded in it should be an understanding of your employees, their vision, but also your vision in terms of the kinds of things that you're looking for, so that you can equip them with what's needed and not you're left, oh my gosh, we need this and we don't have that. Another one is the individual's responsibility, and this one tends to be typically missed, because the individual needs to know what they need, and they are responsible for their success. So they need to be able to take action that will equip them with the skills and experience, right? To be able to take advantage of the opportunities that are available.
Okay.
And what happens, there's no reason for someone to say, oh my gosh, I don't know about this. There's so much information on social media. And also there's so much information available in the company with the training and all that they do. So they could be proactive, but we wait.
Uh-oh, she froze.
She froze.
Yeah. All right. Dr. Bob, you want to pick it up there?
Sure. In fact, I'm going to piggyback on Dr. Ulwyn, because she actually brings about a lot of great points. And this is what comes out of, if you ever read the book, The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge, and he talks about each one of the disciplines. So the first discipline is that of personal mastery. And that's where Dr. Ulwyn talks about like taking that personal responsibility. So it's important that if we go back to what Socrates said, know thyself. So when we know ourselves and we know our current skill set, but if we're missing certain skills, we need to have that responsibility, as she mentioned, to develop the skill sets that's necessary for the position that you ultimately strive for. So that's very important. But again, having that personal mastery. The second one, what Peter Senge talks about, is that of mental models. We all operate off different mental models, but we need to now have more effective mental models, especially when you start rising up in an organization. And this is including people that rise up in different levels of management. We go to lower level supervisors, we're talking about people that are more tactical thinking. But as we rise up, we need to have more of this strategic thinking. So the first two, personal mastery and mental models, has to do with the self. But what she also mentioned was that of the vision organization, knowing the vision of the individual. And what he talks about is having a shared vision. So that's really important, that we all come together and have a shared vision. And a fourth one is that of team learning. So we have individual learning, but we also have team learning. So even the person comes in that leads a team, that needs to be incorporated. And then obviously the fifth discipline, what he talks about is that of systems thinking, which is very important. So everything is interconnected within system organization. The problem with most organizations is that they don't really understand what all the other parts operates as. So as we rise up in organization, we need to understand those components and understand the whole system. But most people won't ever get there because their mindset won't ever allow them to develop that. Because again, the organization may not be a learning organization, as Peter Senge talks about, and others have talked about it as well.
Dr. Mohan, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Peter Principle, because you're coming from the business side of things as a manager who has to promote people as a leader. What are your thoughts on the Peter Principle and how to avoid it?
Yeah, thanks a lot. I think the Peter Principle applies only when the people in the leadership are incompetent.
Oh,
that's my take. If you are incompetent, you are fearful. You want people less qualified to be promoted so that you don't want any threatening relationship with below. So I think any good organization is not Peter Principle. That never applies. It will never will happen. If it is the competent people running, because they want to promote people who are successful. Those who do the, so and in fact, there is what is called, if I remember, what is that, Gilbert Principle or something like that, which is the opposite to Peter Principle. You only promote those who are competent, those who are successful. So in a real successful organization, the Peter Principle doesn't apply. They won't.
That is so interesting. I've never thought about that. I have always felt like promoting someone and the Peter Principle meant that the leadership was lazy because they didn't bother to suss out whether the person could do the job or not. But I never thought about the fact they were incompetent.
I tell you, I have worked in great institutions, JPL, NASA, and I have worked at for DOD, the GPS program. I have never seen, in my experience, anybody is incompetent going up. Because, I mean, there are exceptions always, but 95 or more percentage, the competent gets up. Sometimes competent people don't get promoted because they're very introverted, meaning they don't want to go and but you have to recognize them and identify them. If they are really successful, that you have to train them, you have to encourage them and bring them more open and promote them. So, but generally in a successful organization, this Peter Principle is theory, not in practice. But organizations which are really not successful, they are all people managing by incompetent people, every level.
Correct. Correct.
That's my take.
Yes, and Dr. Lawrence Peter did mention that organizations where you have somebody that's considered super competent, but because of what he just said, is that the leaders are fearful of the super competent person. And what happens to the super competent person? They actually get kicked out of the organization. So when you have that, you have to recognize the good leadership wants that super competent person, and that super competent person will rise up, because it's about
you have to be competent to recognize that. You see,
correct.
If you are incompetent, what happens is you want people of less competent people surrounding you, because then you look good to the. So that's an unfortunate situation, but eventually it will fail. It's a matter of time.
When we see like a sales-driven organization, they tend to have a lot of incompetence. I've seen that. I've had to deal with that running my own business and seeing these organizations that I said, these people are wacko. I was looking at the leadership and I said, how can this person even be a manager or even a VP or whatever? And then I look at CEO and I said, the CEO is like the worst incompetent person I've ever seen in my life. So these are typical, most sales-driven organizations.
Yeah, I want to add one thing to it. It's more than competence. The most valuable thing in an organization is integrity. Competence is excellent. It's very important. But if you lack integrity, it's real failure. So anybody who is promoted has to have obviously competence. That's required. But more than that, you need to have that honesty and integrity as part of the character. Otherwise, the whole institution or a group will fail.
Well, that is our 10 minutes, so I'm going to have to cut us off there. I do think that this is a much longer conversation. I'm going to have to do a quick hits extended about it. So thank you so much for having it with me. I'm sorry we lost Dr. Ulwyn partway through. I'm so glad she got to go first, and I look forward to talking to each of you again very soon.
Oh, she's back.